All right, so the last vocabulary term for you this morning is bias. And like I said in our previous video, the two sampling methods before that have stars next to them, the reason for that is they are biased sampling methods. So let's first learn what bias is. So bias is when you have not, a study has bias if it systematically produces results that misrepresent the population. A bias can also arise if a sample is more likely to include a certain category of the population than another. So bias is when your survey wasn't random enough. There weren't enough things going on to make this survey really, or your sampling method, very valid. So an example of bias in convenient sampling is that same example that I used before, the teacher asking students in the front row if they see the board. Well, they might be able to see the board in the front row because they're in the front row, but that doesn't mean the students in the back can see the board. So convenient sampling is not a valid or a good way to sample a population because it's not random. So you can't generalize your findings to the entire population. With self-selected sampling, that's when people volunteer to be a part of the study. What's bad about self-selected sampling is, again, it's not random. So typically when people have to volunteer to take a survey, like let's say you have to go online and fill out a questionnaire, it only brings out strong opinions in people. People who either love a service or absolutely despise a service are going to fill out the survey. But people with pretty neutral opinions might not care enough to log into the website and fill out a survey. So convenient sampling and self-selected sampling are instances where you typically have bias. Some examples of bias also would be a manager asking his employees if they like their jobs, because if the manager's the one doing the asking, there's kind of like a power play situation happening there where you might feel uncomfortable saying no because you don't want to lose your job or you don't want to be on bad terms with your boss or things of that nature. So that's one thing to take into consideration. Another thing that I'm sure you guys are all super familiar with, it's not a sampling method by any means, but it is definitely a biased practice, is an influencer that is sponsored by a brand telling you they like a product. And I know you guys are seeing that daily, I'm sure. So that's just an example that I wanted to give you that is super relevant and that you've seen all the time. So bias is not good. You don't want to have bias in your sampling method. So that is why the first three we talked about, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, and systematic sampling, are significantly better approaches to conducting a survey or a sampling method than the convenience and the self-selected sampling.